Okay, this is the last part of chapter 43, which is part 4. So, finalizing our information on the adaptive immune system, we'll talk about vaccines and allergies and autoimmune diseases. So, we were talking about activation of B cells with the use of helper T cells. So, now we're going to talk about how we activate the cytotoxic T cells in response to infections or pathogens. So, cytotoxic T cells will use toxic proteins to kill cells that are infected by viruses or other intracellular pathogens like bacterial cells or fungi. The way that they do that is that the cytotoxic T cells recognize fragments of the foreign proteins that are produced by the infected cells. So, they're going to do this in a similar manner, which is going to be the MHC molecules, the major histocompatibility complex molecules, are going to raise the flag, if you will, of the infection, and that will allow for the cytotoxic T cells to be activated. Once they're activated, they will secrete proteins that disrupt the membranes of their target cells, and it's going to trigger apoptosis or cell death. So if we look at how this happens, here is an infected cell. Again, there are pieces of the antigen inside of that infected cell. That infected cell is going to raise the MHC attached to that antigen, put that on the surface of the cell. The cytotoxic T cell recognizes that there is a foreign antigen there, along with a CD8. So remember, on our helper T cell, it was called a CD4. This is our CD8 protein that will help with the activation of our cytotoxic T cells. So once this cytotoxic T cell recognizes that there is an infected cell that has presented an antigen attached to that MHC molecule, then the cytotoxic T cell will release enzymes, and these enzymes will create holes or pores in the surface of the infected cell. Once the pores are created with these perforin molecules, these are proteins, then of course that infected cell will die and will not be able to create new bacteria or viral particles, and this will help to slow down the infection process. And then our cytotoxic T cell now can go on and perform this function on more infected cells that have the same antigen being displayed. Watch this.
Now let's look in more detail at cell-mediated immunity. Cytotoxic T cells are the main warriors of cell-mediated immunity, which attacks body cells that have been altered by infection or cancer, or transplanted cells that are foreign to the body. An infected, cancerous, or transplanted cell displays foreign antigens on its surface. T cell receptors on specific cytotoxic T cells recognize and bind to specific antigens on cells. Cytotoxic T cells respond to this contact and to interleukin-2 sent out by helper T cells by producing the protein perforin. Perforin molecules are released from the cytotoxic T cell and attack the membrane of the infected cell, punching holes in it, which allows water and solutes to enter. The cell bursts and is killed. In this way, cytotoxic T cells deprive pathogens of their host cells so they cannot reproduce. Tumor cells are also removed from the body by cytotoxic T cells. In this way, cell-mediated immunity, carried out by cytotoxic T cells, destroys altered or infected body cells.
All right. So what we saw is that both the humoral and the cell-mediated responses can include primary and secondary immune responses, and we know that those memory cells will enable the secondary responses that we see. This is a nice summary slide looking at how the two sides work together. So remember, we're talking about the adaptive immune system here. It's got the humoral immune response side and our cell-mediated immune response side. So we have our first exposure to a particular antigen. We know that an antigen-presenting cell will take in that pathogen. So whether that be a virus, a bacterial cell, or a fungus, it's going to present a piece of that particular antigen to the helper T cell. That helper T cell will help to activate the B cell side, so the humoral side, but also the helper T cell helps to activate cytotoxic T cells. We also know that cytotoxic T cells can also be activated by antigen presenting cells as well, and we just saw that. So that helper T cell really is a nice way to activate both sides of the adaptive immune system, the humoral side and the cell-mediated side. The cytotoxic T cells will go on to proliferate, meaning make more active cytotoxic T cells, which will again go on to help kill any infected cells, and memory cytotoxic T cells can be created as well. Our helper T cells on the B cell side are going to, again, help activate our B cells into effector cells. Those are the plasma cells that are secreting the antibodies that will help to defend against any pathogens. Again, we talked about opsonization, complement, precipitation. These are all ways that antibodies can work to help get rid of any pathogens. The B cell will also create memory B cells as well, which will continue to move around and help. So these memory T cells, memory B cells, and memory cytotoxic T cells will continue to float around. The second time the animal or the body encounters this particular antigen, then the response is going to be greater and faster because these have already been formed. And we know that this is going to keep happening. So there's an amplification of the response every time this antigen is encountered, which is a great thing. So the adaptive immune system adapts, meaning it creates these memory cells to pathogens that it has seen before. And this memory becomes very important in terms of combating pathogens, typically before you actually even know that an infection has occurred. So no symptoms are felt or encountered by the animal, which is a great thing. Okay.
This patient's cold is caused by rhinoviruses, shown here in red, that entered her nasal passages and escaped the first-line innate defenses such as mucus and cilia.
Those are the barrier defenses.
Some of these rhinoviruses entered the respiratory epithelial cells where they replicated, releasing more rhinoviruses into the patient's nasal passages and tissue fluids. In the tissue fluids, cells of the second line of innate defense, such as this dendritic cell, carry out surveillance for anything that appears foreign. Dendritic cells engulf the rhinovirus within an endosome. The endosome fuses with a lysosome, whose enzymes digest the rhinovirus. The resulting rhinovirus fragments are called epitopes. The dendritic cell then attaches the rhinovirus epitopes to presentation molecules called MHC2. This complex folds outward so that it sits on the outside of the dendritic cell membrane. The dendritic cell then enters a lymphatic vessel and travels to a nearby lymph node. Here, the dendritic cell, part of the innate defenses, encounters a helper T cell, which is part of the adaptive defenses. The T cell receptor, or TCR, of this helper T cell recognizes the rhinovirus epitope, while the CD4 glycoprotein associated with the TCR recognizes the MHC2. The dendritic cell then stimulates activation of this helper T cell. Adaptive defenses help to control the current infection, but also provide immunity against future infections by the same rhinovirus. They are carried out by two types of lymphocytes, B cells, and T cells. Immature B cells conduct surveillance in the lymph nodes, using B cell receptors, or BCR, to recognize only one specific epitope. The BCR on the left does not recognize the rhinovirus, but the BCR on the right does, and this B cell is selected for activation in a step called clonal selection. The selected B cell takes in the rhinovirus, degrades it, and presents the rhinovirus epitope with its MHC2. Our mature helper T cell recognizes the rhinovirus epitope with its TCR and the MHC2 with its CD4. Then the helper T cell secretes chemical messengers known as cytokines that activate the B cell. The B cell proliferates and differentiates in a process called clonal expansion, resulting in two types of cell. Memory B cells carry the memory of this pathogen for many years. Plasma cells secrete antibodies that conduct surveillance for more rhinoviruses, grouping them together so they are easy targets for phagocytes. Antibodies in the blood and tissue fluids seek out free rhinoviruses. The antibodies neutralize the rhinovirus by binding to its surface molecules, thus preventing attachment to host cells. Antibodies are humoral defenses that target free pathogens. But what about the rhinoviruses that are already inside our patient's cells? Another type of adaptive defense cell, called a cytotoxic T cell, can locate and destroy rhinovirus-infected cells. It provides cell-mediated, or cellular, immunity. Let's return to our patient's lymph node to see how cytotoxic T cells become activated. The T cell receptor, or TCR, of this particular cytotoxic T cell is genetically programmed to recognize the rhinovirus epitope when presented by the dendritic cell. This time, the epitope is presented differently, with an MHC1, which is recognized by a CD8 glycoprotein on the cytotoxic T cell. With the help of cytokines from a nearby helper T cell, the cytotoxic
Well, I guess that's the end that the cytotoxic T cell gets activated, as we know, and that will go on and kill any cells that are infected. Okay, so we talked about antigens and the fact that each antigen has a specific region called an epitope, and that epitope is what is going to be recognized by the immune system. So the nice thing about the adaptive immune system and the memory cells that are created is that we are able to engineer a way to pre-expose individuals in our society, so Homo sapiens, to particular pathogens that are not going to make them sick and will help to protect us from future potential infections. So these are going to be immunizations. So immunizations, very interesting, developed, the very first one developed by Jonas Salk to polio. And these immunizations have come a long way since that first one was developed in the late 40s, early 50s. So the way that immunizations work are that these antigens are artificially introduced into the body to generate the adaptive immune response, and then the whole goal is to create memory cells. Those memory cells then become important when the individual is infected with that pathogen again later. And again, like I said before, typically with a full course of the appropriate vaccinations or immunizations, the individual doesn't even know that an infection has taken place. So they often don't know that they've been infected because their adaptive immune system takes care of it so quickly that no symptoms are felt. So immunizations are carried out with vaccines that are preparations of antigens from many different sources. And many vaccination programs have been successful against infectious diseases and actually have some have eradicated diseases worldwide. So good examples here, polio. So this is showing you 1988. The countries in purple are countries that had eliminated polio, which is a virus that can lead to pretty severe neurological consequences. This is a map in 2014. It shows actually 3 countries that still had endemic polio, Nigeria. You can see Nigeria here, Afghanistan and Pakistan. The latest numbers from 2022 show that Nigeria has eliminated polio. So it's down to 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, that have polio. The rest of the world has eliminated it. So we're getting very close to eradicating it. Smallpox is another example of a virus that was actually eliminated completely. So that's been eradicated worldwide due to vaccinations. Down here showing you rates of measles vaccinations. So this is again in 2014. You can see in countries in blue have a vaccination rates between 90 and 100%. So that's a positive thing as well. So there are different types of vaccinations, immunizations, and different types of immunity that your body can have. You can have active immunity or passive immunity. Active immunity is when your body creates the adaptive immune response for itself. So this active immunity develops naturally when a pathogen invades your body and elicits either a primary or a secondary immune response. So this is you being infected by a pathogen, no matter what that pathogen is. Passive immunity is when you are picking up immune cells or pieces of immune system molecules from someone else, either another animal or another person. Passive immunity is not a situation where your body is developing these cells or these molecules, but you are picking them up from another person. These passive immunity is going to provide immediate and short-term protection. So it's not a long-term protection that will be provided, but it can be helpful if a person is very sick or for people that are immunocompromised, such as very small babies whose immune systems are not yet primed. When you look at the differences between types of natural versus artificial immunity, you can have active natural immunity, again, which would be you being infected by something, so infected with a pathogen, so bacteria, virus, fungus. Your body goes through the process of developing an adaptive response to it. An active artificial immunity would be you getting a immunization or a vaccination from a healthcare professional. So you didn't get infected in the wild or out in society. You actually went and were exposed to the particular antigen via a vaccination. That could be typically injections, or sometimes they can be nasal sprays, or they could be oral vaccinations. But still your body is the one that is creating this adaptive response. That's why it's active. Passive natural immunity occurs in babies. So antibodies are able to cross the placenta from the mother to the fetus. So while the baby is gestating in utero, the fetus can receive antibodies. The other way that this can happen is when antibodies pass from the mother's breast milk to the baby. So again, breastfeeding is another great way for a mom to pass her antibodies on to her baby. So babies are very sensitive to infections because their adaptive immune system has not seen anything yet. So the more antibodies that mom can share with the baby, the safer that baby will be until they are able to get all of the immunizations that they require. So passive natural immunity, antibodies pass from the mother either through the placenta while the baby is gestating in utero, or through the breast milk while the baby is breastfeeding after birth. Passive artificial immunity would be a situation where, and we encountered this in COVID-19, the pandemic, when individuals who had recovered. So again, early individuals who were infected with SARS-CoV-2, the virus, they developed antibodies. We were able to take antibodies from their plasma and then give those monoclonal antibodies to people who were very sick. That's a way that we could have passive artificial immunity. So this can be done not only by taking antibodies from a person who has been healed or cured or is not sick anymore, but we can also create these monoclonal antibodies in animals as well. And we can isolate it from their plasma, from their blood, even sometimes from the milk. You can genetically engineer animals to pass it through their milk. And then we can give those to people that are very sick, and it can help to keep them alive while their body works to fight off the infection as well. So active natural immunity, active artificial immunity, passive natural immunity, and passive artificial immunity. So all different types of immune responses or ways to pick up immunity. Allergies are a situation that quite a few people face. Allergies are situations where you have an immune system that has a exaggerated or overactive response to particular antigens. These antigens are called allergens. Localized allergies, so hay fever, so thinking of being allergic to pollen. IgE is the antibody that's produced after first exposure to an allergen, such as particular pollen grains. The IgE antibodies attach to receptors on mast cells. And remember, mast cells are responsible for releasing histamine, and the histamine response actually will go up the more times this person is exposed to the allergen. So again, it's just an overreaction or a hypersensitivity of the body to particular allergens, oftentimes naturally occurring proteins or other molecules. So again, the mast cells that I mentioned before that are releasing the histamine, they do help to bring about that inflammatory response. And you typically have the allergy symptoms that would come from inflammatory responses. So think of sneezing, itchy, watery eyes, sometimes hives right on the skin. These are all things that histamine will do. It causes congestion, runny nose. You can end up with a very acute allergic response, which is called anaphylactic shock. This is a very life-threatening situation, and that happens when a person is exposed to an allergen and they have a massive amount of histamine that is released into their body all at once. An injection, excuse me, of epinephrine, which is the fancy name for adrenaline, can help to rapidly counteract the allergic response. But then as soon as you give this person an injection of epinephrine, or they call them EpiPens, you have to take them to the hospital because their blood vessels dilate and they are the heart rate speeds up dramatically. So you have to make sure that they get to the hospital to take care of the response to the epinephrine, but also that the allergic response is handled as well. So people with severe allergies, often food allergies to nuts, milk, dairy, eggs, things like that, can lead to anaphylactic shock. So very important that those people carry around EpiPens and let people know that they have this issue, so that if they do go into anaphylactic shock, which can often, again, drop your blood pressure. Another major problem with anaphylactic shock is that your throat, the trachea, the tissue in the trachea can swell shut, and that would obviously lead to loss of oxygen to the body. This is showing you allergies. So you have an initial exposure You can see IgE, these are antibodies that are attached to mast cells. And the initial exposure is due to a allergen that has come in and sensitized the body. Each subsequent time that an individual sees or is exposed to a particular allergen, whether that's a food or a pollen or something from the environment, you have binding to those particular IgE antibodies that are attached to the mast cells. And the more binding you have, the more histamine will be released. So that histamine is going to lead to, again, all of those inflammatory responses, which could lead to anaphylactic shock in a worst case scenario. Autoimmune diseases are also trouble with the immune system. This is essentially when the immune system loses tolerance for its self cells and turns against certain molecules of the body. So there's a variety of different auto means self. So different variety of autoimmune diseases. Some that you might have heard of are lupus, RA, rheumatoid arthritis, insulin-dependent diabetes, multiple sclerosis, MS. Multiple sclerosis, you probably have heard of, is one where the immune system attacks the myelin sheath, which is found around the axons in neurons in the central nervous system. So the effects or the symptoms that people feel from multiple sclerosis are due to the location of the myelin sheath on that neuron that has been targeted by the immune system. The good news is that there are some really good treatments for autoimmune diseases. Typically, a person has to go and get an IV injection of immunosuppressant drugs. This is a good thing because it slows down or calms down the aggravation that the immune system is undergoing. The issue is that there is a fine line that you walk then, because we want to make sure we don't suppress the immune system too much, because that individual could be susceptible to common viruses, bacterial cells like our SARS-CoV-2. The immune system is definitely affected by the food that you eat. It's affected by your exercise. It's affected by your sleep. Sufficient rest is definitely important for the immune system. That's one of the first things that starts to decline when a person is sleep deprived. If you are sleep deprived and your immune system is depressed, then or suppressed, you then would have a greater likelihood of being getting ill. Not only just acute things like a flu or bacterial infection, but also can lead to long-term and greater stresses on the body as well. So good sleep is important, good food is important, and then of course moderate exercise is always very important. But you have to be careful not to exercise to exhaustion. So I think most people don't have that trouble. But finding a way to get moderate exercise is definitely important for the immune system. All right, that is all. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye.